Hi, my name is Tina Paniqui and welcome to Doorways. And the topic I want to, or the doorway I invite you to go through today is about when nothing's wrong but something's missing. And I want to talk about something that I think many of us experience but don't really give ourselves permission to name. And that's the moment where, on the surface, everything's great. You know, work's great, family life's great, beautiful husband or wife, fantastic children, but something's missing. So nothing's falling apart, nothing's obviously wrong, and yet you just can't touch what it is. And it doesn't have to be anything dramatic. It doesn't have to be my life's awful, or, I know lots of people do have that, but it doesn't have to be that dramatic. And for a long time, I had that quite some sense that underneath something was missing, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And I didn't really trust that feeling. I thought it was me, actually. I told myself that nothing was wrong. I was being ungrateful. For a long time, I've been very grateful, I suppose, if you want to call it that way, that I've had a great job, I've had a beautiful home, my children are now grown up and successful, I've got beautiful grandchildren, and I told myself that I was being ungrateful because I should be happy. I should be joyous. I should feel a certain way. And that's by, me being capable, by being busy and responsible, meant that I should just get on with it, basically. So I did. And I did work harder, and I stayed where it was easier. And that's both in terms of work, relationships, patterns, maybe because they made sense at the time, but even when it didn't feel quite right, I stayed. And slowly, without noticing it, over a period of time, I've lost parts of myself. We're taught at such an early age that working harder is the answer. You work hard at your relationship, you work hard at your job, but believing that working harder will automatically bring you joy and happiness, well, that's just an illusion. And most of us inherit this type of way of working. It's in everything that we surround ourselves with, particularly in social media and books. If you self-development books, self-awareness books, manifestation books, or social media. But it's actually ingrained into us from childhood, from our family, from culture. And ideas of what success looks like, whether that be the house, 2.2 children, the car, whatever that might be, and what responsibility looks like for us, and what we are supposed to tolerate and what you should be grateful for. And then we live those ideas out, often for years, without even consciously choosing them. And it doesn't just show up in works, it shows up in relationships too. We stay because it's familiar, because nothing's terribly wrong, because it's easier than asking uncomfortable questions. And so over time, we adapt and we shrink. And we stop saying certain things, or we stop wanting certain things, and we tell ourselves that's just how life is. And what I've come to understand, and I'm still learning this, is that when something missing feeling is there, it isn't a problem, it's information. It's the part of you that knows that you've outgrown the way of you're living, or who you're relating to, or the people that you're around, or the job that you're doing. And that doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't. It just mean, and it definitely doesn't mean that you're ungrateful. What it means is that simply you're ready for change. And that's what Doorways is about. It's not answers, it's not quick fixes, it's just conversations that resonate and open something within inside of you. And a doorway doesn't tell you what to do. You don't go to your front door and it says you will turn left or right. That's signage. Well, we're not having signage on this. We're just having an opportunity. And I would like this to invite you to notice where you are and what you have stopped listening to, or what you might have stopped listening to. And for me, that doorway opened when I realised that resets weren't fixing my tiredness. So I started to go on yoga retreats, and I went on these yoga retreats because I was getting burnt out at work, and I enjoyed the company of the people that were there. It was fresh, it was new, it was different. I got tired of just sitting on a sunbed by the pool, just collapsing, and I wanted to do something different. But what I realised is that my body and my mind weren't just tired through, basically it couldn't be solved by sleeping. Just when you're weary, and it doesn't, you go on these holidays, and then within 2 days of you being back from holiday, you're back to exactly where you were before. And that's at the point that I learned that that was the time to change what was going on. And I realised that when I went to these places, it slowed me down enough to notice that actually what was missing for me, and what brought me alive again, and what brought me joy. And joy, I've learned, is that something that's big, it's not impressive, it's not this huge life-changing moment. It absolutely, but for me, and for many years I couldn't do this. If you asked me what joy was, I couldn't tell you. I knew what could make me happy, but I didn't know what joy was. And for me now, because I've learned to quieten myself, and I've learned to listen to myself, and I know that joy is in my grandchildren, in the simplicity of crafting with them and making crowns and swords and playing, and just the pure innocence and joy of my grandchildren brings me no amount of joy. I don't have to be anything that I'm not. I can just be me. All my warts and all, good, bad, indifferent, they don't care. We can play, we can have joy, we can have laughter. And it's also about things like walking in the forest and noticing where I am, not just walking in the forest because you've got to go for a walk to keep fit. It's about noticing those leaves, noticing the frost on the cobwebs. It could be watching mist roll across the land. It could be paddling. It could be being cold and laughing, but being present. Indeed, I used to go out with somebody who hated traffic, despised traffic. He'd do anything to get away from traffic, and he'd drive miles out of his way to do with traffic. And in truth, I used to do that because I used to sit on the M6 slow-paced corridor up to Birmingham, and then sit on the A38 for hours at a time. I used to get so frustrated. And then as I learned to change my lens on things and change how I looked at stuff, I realised actually it was an opportunity to notice things. And I used to then look out the window while I was sat still on the motorway and just see what was going on. And any of that is productive, and none of it looks like success, but do you know what? It feels good to me. And what's changed in me is that, and what resonates wholeheartedly now, is I pay attention. I pay attention to what my body is doing, how it's feeling. I don't always know where that's going. I don't always have a plan, but I've learned to say yes to what feels and makes me feel alive, and to stop overriding myself quite so quickly that it's not a rule. I just notice. So if something gives me a really funny feeling in my tummy, I don't do it. And that's for everything. That can be for work, it can be what I'm going to eat, it could be where I'm going to go. If I don't feel, or if my body doesn't talk to me in a way that's comfortable or joyous, I just don't do it. I follow what brings me joy now. And life traditionally becomes very efficient, it becomes organised, it becomes sensible, and somehow thinner. And if that resonates and, you know, with you and you notice it, you don't need to change your life, and you don't need lots of answers. But what you can do is be honest with yourself, and you can say, there is something missing and I'd like to find out what it is. And that's a doorway. And I invite you to walk through that doorway.